The word multitasking came about in the mid-60s when IBM came out with the IBM 360 computer, which could multitask. It had a CPU unit that was able to take various different processes that it needed, or different tasks to do at the same time, and was able to have them come in, and here's the answer to this one, here's the answer to this one, here's the answer to this one, here's the answer to this one. It was multitasking. But it had one brain, if you will, one CPU, one computer processing unit. And it wasn't really multitasking. It looked like it, because it was like, what's the, here's a question, here's a question, here's a question, here's a question, here's an answer, here's an answer, here's an answer, here's an answer. What it was really doing was it was deciding how to allocate its time, how much time to spend on this one, and then while it's working on that one, come back and work on this one, and then come back and work on this one, and then come out with the answer to this one, and then work on this one. It was doing them at different times, but so fast that it seemed like there you were, all working on at the same time. But it wasn't actually at the same time. It was sort of one after the other, after the other, after the other. So, if that's the case, it's really what we might call this rapid toggling. It's this rapidly moving back and forth. So maybe that's what's going on with us too, and this is what the research is showing. Anybody here ever talk on the phone and send an email? And when you say send an email, you're being polite, because you're not just pushing the send button.
Right,
what you're saying is we're composing an email, or we're reading an email. You ever get it where you get an email and it's like something very casual, and you're like, okay, and then you get an email, it's like, oh my gosh, right? Guess which one draws more attention? Oh my gosh. Now you think you're just looking at an email, but you're actually, without knowing it, looking at something that's going to draw a certain amount of your attention away from whatever you're doing, and you don't necessarily even know up front how much it's going to draw away, because that's something that just happens. One of the frustrating things and curious and disturbing things that happens on the road is somebody can look at a text message, which is its own thing that we'll talk about, which is very problematic. But it could be like, okay, see you, right? That's one thing. And it could be, oh my God, guess what just happened? You have to call me right away. Now, if you're looking at that one while you're driving, and you're used to sort of doing this and doing this and doing this, all of a sudden you are, and you haven't made that decision consciously. This is now the most important thing, and boom, things are going to happen. But that's where this limited span of attention that we have, or this limited capacity of attention, and this is sort of an important part of this conversation. For us to pay attention, for us to do different things at the same time, or different things really quickly one after the other, we're using our attention. And our attention gets drained. And as our attention gets drained, our ability to make decisions gets compromised. Our willpower gets compromised. There's this toll that using our attention takes, and multitasking, of course, is taking a lot of our attention and toggling back and forth. This is the curious piece. When we toggle back and forth, so that we're working on our email, we're working on the email, we get the phone call. We said, okay, I'll take it. Oh, how's it going? Yes. Okay, good. You can already sense how, unlike the drink and the listening, these are more closely, you need a little bit more of the same stuff to do this. And here's the part. This is the part. You think, listening and working on your email. And in fact, maybe at the same time, you're almost like, okay, bye-bye, and you send the email. So you somehow were doing both at roughly the same time. But every time you were listening to the person, like they said, oh, this is something you need to remember, right? Okay, got to shift gears, direct it over here. And you're like, okay, and then you're like, oh, back to my email, shift gears, back to my email, shift gears, back to the person, shift gears, back to the, and this is happening so fast and so continuously that we aren't necessarily aware that it's happening, but it is. If we watch people in brain scanners as they're multitasking, we see this more complex processing of information, and every time you shift gears, just like I do, because in a car, they used to have gears in cars where you shift gears, and you know about gear shifting in cars? Really? Very impressive, Stuart. Every time you do that, you might imagine you are engaging in the dispending of energy, and so every time you make this little shifting, you are utilizing your own attentional resources and the processing of this brain of ours, which is ultimately limited in the amount of attention that we have to dispense at any time, although it gets replenished. It's constantly getting replenished. Might be that chocolate cake helps replenish it. But in more likelihood, it's probably the cakes that, you get home at the end of the day and you're really sort of fatigued, and all of a sudden, even though you weren't going to have the brownie, or you weren't going to have the pizza, you weren't going to have the whatever, you have it. Because there's some aspect of our capacity to have willpower or something that's diminished. We just don't have it in us because we do get fatigued.